If I'd known what my daughter was planning, I'd have never opened that door. Not that day. Not ever. See, I've been living in that little brick house on Maple Street for more than 30 years now. My husband, God rest his soul, he laid every single tile himself. Said he wanted the floor to remember his hands, so I'd never feel alone after he was gone. And y'all, every time I walk barefoot across that hallway, I can still feel him there. That house wasn't just walls and windows. It was my whole life, pressed between paint and memory. I thought my daughter, Denise, understood that. At least, I wanted to believe she did. Denise used to be my baby. The kind who'd leave little notes on the fridge saying, "Love you." Mama with hearts drawn all crooked. But over the years, she changed. I told myself it was just adulthood. Work stress. Bills piling up. Life, you know. But something in her voice started sounding hollow. She'd call, but never stay long. Drop off groceries, then rush right back out. No eye contact. No real hugs, just distance. Then one afternoon, I noticed something real strange. A man standing outside my house, measuring my front fence, clipboard in hand, taking notes like he owned the place. When I walked up and asked what he was doing, he smiled all polite-like and sighed. "Just taking notes for the listing, Mom." "The listing? What listing?" I asked. But before I could even blink, he got in his truck and drove off. I just stood there, frozen. The wind caught the edge of an old for sale sign lying flat in my neighbor's yard. For a second, I thought, no, it couldn't be. Denise would never. But still, the seed was planted. Over the next few weeks, more odd things started happening. Mail missing from the porch. Phone calls where the person hung up soon as I said hello. And Denise, she kept showing up at strange hours, saying she just needed to check something in the basement. Once, I caught her going through my filing cabinet, the one where I keep my husband's will and all the house papers. She smiled all nervous and said, "Oh, I was just organizing things for you." I didn't question her. That's the thing about mothers. Even when we feel something's wrong, we want to believe our children mean well. But deep down, I felt the shift. The air in that house wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, watchful, like the walls themselves were holding secrets. Then came that day. It was a Friday afternoon, warm and lazy. I'd gone to the corner store for milk and bread. When I came back, 2 cars were parked in my driveway. At first, I thought maybe Denise had company. Maybe she wanted to surprise me. But when I stepped inside, my heart just stopped. 2 strangers were standing in my living room. A man and a woman, both smiling, holding clipboards, looking around like they owned the place. "Can I help you?" I asked, clutching my bag tighter. The woman turned, startled. "Oh. You must be Mrs. Carter. We're so sorry. We thought you'd be out. The realtor said you'd moved already." "Moved?" My voice cracked. "Moved where?" They exchanged this awkward glance. Then the man said, "We're the new owners, ma'am. The house sale went through last week." For a moment, I thought it was some kind of prank. Then the woman handed me a paper. A property deed with my name on it. Signed, dated, stamped. My knees almost gave out. Because that signature, it was mine. But I ain't never touched that paper in my life. I stumbled into the kitchen, trying to make sense of it all. Denise's purse was on the counter. My checkbook was missing. The filing cabinet drawer hung wide open, empty. Something inside me just snapped. I grabbed my phone and called her. No answer. Called again. Voicemail. When she finally picked up, her voice was small, tired. "Mom, can I call you back?" "No," I said, shaking. "What's going on?" Why are there people in my house saying they bought it? Silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Then she said the one thing I'll never forget. Mom, please don't be mad. I was gonna tell you. That sentence broke me more than anything else. Because that's what betrayal sounds like. Calm, polite, familiar. It doesn't shout. It whispers. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I could say was, tell me what. She hung up. That night, I sat on the living room floor with the papers those strangers had left behind. Every page had my name, my address, my signature. I ran my fingers over the ink, tracing the letters. It looked like mine, same loops, same curls. But the hand behind it wasn't mine. It was shaky, off balance, almost as if someone had tried too hard to make it perfect. I pressed my palm flat on that fake signature and whispered, "You used my name to erase my life." Outside, the porch light flickered. The house felt different, colder somehow, like it already knew it didn't belong to me anymore. I looked around at the photos on the wall, my husband holding Denise as a baby, Denise on her first day of school, our family Christmas. And it hit me all at once. The memories were mine, but the walls weren't. The people who bought my house left their card on the table. Underneath, it was something else, a plain white envelope with my name written in neat blue ink. But the handwriting, it wasn't Denise's. I stared at that envelope for a long time, heart pounding. I didn't open it that night. I couldn't, because something told me whatever was inside would I didn't sleep that night. Every tick of the clock sounded like footsteps in the hallway. Every creak in the floor made me think Denise was coming through that door, ready to explain, ready to say it was all some big misunderstanding, that she hadn't really done it, that she was still my little girl. But morning came, and there was no knock. Just the same quiet house that now belonged to someone else. The envelope sat on the coffee table, untouched, waiting. I stared at it for hours before I finally opened it. Inside were three things: a folded letter, a cashier's check for $48,000, and a photograph, old, wrinkled, and torn along the edge. The photo was from 1994. Me, my husband, and little Denise sitting in front of the house after repainting the porch. Her hands were covered in white paint. She was grinning with her missing front teeth. My husband's handwriting was on the back. Our forever home. I felt my stomach twist. Then I opened the letter. Mom, I know you'll never forgive me, but please read this before calling the police. I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it to save you. You're 3 months behind on your property tax, and the bank already filed notice. You never told me. They were gonna take the house anyway, and you'd get nothing. I found a buyer who could close fast. I had to forge your signature. I know it's wrong, but at least now, you have something. I left you the full amount. The rest went to cover the debts. Please, don't hate me. Denise, I just sat there, staring at those words. Every sentence felt like a knife, cutting deep, then twisting. I wanted to be angry. I was angry. But underneath that anger was something worse, shame. Because she was right about one thing. I had fallen behind. I just didn't want her to know. After my husband died, the bills stacked up like bricks. Medical, taxes, repairs. I told everyone I was fine. But truth is, I was drowning quietly. Still, that didn't make it right. You don't fix a broken bridge by burning it. I looked around the house, my husband's tools still in the corner, the smell of his cologne faint on his old jacket. And I thought, she sold all this like it was furniture. The check sat in my palm, $48,000. Money that felt like guilt printed on paper. I thought of going to the police. I really did. But then I remembered Denise's face when she was 5. crying because she broke my favorite vase and trying to glue it back together with honey. She always wanted to fix things, even when she made them worse. That evening, I went to her apartment. She didn't open the door right away. When she finally did, she looked smaller somehow. Eyes red, hair messy, a duffel bag half-zipped behind her. "Mom," she whispered. I didn't yell, didn't cry, just handed her the letter. I read it. She looked down, tears welling up. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't know what else to do. Did you ever think to ask me?" I said quietly. She shook her head. "You would have said no." "You're damn right I would have said no," I said, voice trembling, "because it wasn't yours to sell." She sat down on the couch, covering her face with her hands. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavier than words. Then she said something that made me stop breathing. "Mom, there's more. The buyer, he wasn't just anyone. Turns out, the man who bought my house wasn't some random investor. He was someone named Mark Dempsey, a name I hadn't heard in over 30 years. But when I did, it felt like the past cracked open like a tomb. Mark Dempsey was my husband's old business partner, the same man who nearly bankrupted our family when their construction company collapsed. The same man my husband swore he'd never forgive. The same man who disappeared owing us $70,000. And now, somehow, he owned my house. "Denise," I said slowly, "how'd you meet him?" She hesitated. "He contacted me after I listed it online. Said he remembered Dad. That he wanted to help. He offered more than anyone else." I stared at her. "You told him my name?" She nodded. My blood went cold. That night, I couldn't stay in the house anymore. It felt invaded. Like every corner whispered secrets I wasn't supposed to hear. I packed a small bag, locked the door, and went to stay with my neighbor, Mrs. Langley. She's known me for years, the kind of woman who still bakes for the church on Sundays. When I told her everything, she covered her mouth and said, "Oh, honey, that man's no good. He's back in town for something, and it ain't charity." Her words echoed in my head long after I lay down to sleep. The next morning, I went to the county office to verify the sale. Every document was clean. Perfect. Filed under my name, notarized, sealed. Whoever helped Denise knew exactly what they were doing. But then I noticed something odd. One of the signatures on the witness line was blurred. The notary stamp was smudged, the date slightly off. It read August 23rd, but the sale papers were dated August 25th. That two-day gap meant the signature came before the documents existed. Forgery. My hands were shaking as I made copies of everything. I didn't care about the money anymore. I wanted the truth. When I got home, Denise was waiting on the porch. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "Mom, please don't do this," she said softly. "Do what?" "Dig deeper. He said he'd handle it if we just left things alone." I stepped closer. "He who?" "Mark." She looked away, and that's when I knew. She was afraid of him. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a man's voice said, "Mrs. Carter, this is Mark Dempsey. I think we need to talk privately. You don't want this getting messy." His tone was calm, polite even, but behind it, something dark, like he was used to getting what he wanted. I told him I wasn't interested in any meeting. He chuckled softly. "Oh, I think you will be. Check your mailbox tomorrow." Then he hung up. The next morning, there was a yellow envelope in the mailbox. Inside was a single photograph. Me sitting in my living room the day those strangers walked in, taken through the window. No note, no explanation. Just proof that someone had been watching me. My hands went cold. I locked every door, every window. Called Denise, no answer. And in that silence, I realized this wasn't just about the house anymore. It was I looked around at what little I had left, my memories boxed up, my heart bruised, my trust shattered. Then I made a decision. If Mark Dempsey thought he could scare me into silence, he picked the wrong woman, because he might own the deed, but he didn't own me. I took the envelope with his photo, the forged papers, and that smudged notary page, and I drove straight to the police station. But when I got there, I saw something that made my knees buckle. Right behind the front desk, pinned to a community board, was a flyer. Mark Dempsey, missing since September 3rd. I just stood there, frozen. The officer noticed and asked if I was okay. I couldn't even answer, because the date on that flyer was 5 days before he called me. The flyer fluttered under the air vent like a warning. Missing, Mark Dempsey, age 62. Last seen, September 3rd. But that couldn't be right. He called me 5 days later. I could still hear his voice in my head. Calm, confident, almost smug. So, if Mark was missing, who had I spoken to? I took a photo of the flyer and stepped outside, my knees still shaking. The sun felt harsh that morning, and for the first time in years, the town I'd called home felt strange. Every face looked unfamiliar. Every car that passed made my stomach tighten. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold. The envelope, the check, the photo, they were all laid out in front of me. I felt like I was staring at a puzzle where every piece was from a different box. And then it hit me. If someone had gone through all the trouble of forging my signature, stealing my house, and pretending to be a man who'd gone missing, then this wasn't just about Denise making a bad decision. It was bigger, more dangerous. I called Denise again. No answer. Texted. Nothing. Her phone went straight to voicemail. That's when I remembered the duffel bag she had behind her when I last saw her. Like she'd already packed. Like she was ready to run. I grabbed my coat and keys and drove to her apartment. It was a small 2-story building near the edge of town, paint peeling, mailbox stuffed with flyers. I knocked, no answer. I knocked again, harder this time. When I finally turned the handle, the door creaked open. It wasn't locked. The apartment was dark, too dark. The curtains were drawn tight, and the air smelled like burnt coffee and fear. On the kitchen counter sat 2 mugs, one half full, one empty, and next to them, my family photo album. I froze. That album had been in my living room, on the bottom shelf of the old cabinet. I hadn't touched it since my husband's funeral. How did it end up here? I opened it. Every page was there. Our birthdays, vacations, Christmas mornings, but toward the end, something strange. New photos had been added. Photos I didn't take. One showed Denise standing in front of a black SUV. Another showed me sitting on my porch, reading. And another, this one made my heart skip, showed both of us through the living room window, talking the day we argued about the house. They'd been watching us for months. That's when I heard a floorboard creak behind me. I turned fast. A man stood in the hallway. Not Mark Dempsey. Younger, taller, dark jacket, clean-shaven face, eyes that didn't blink enough. He raised his hands slightly. Mrs. Carter, please, don't scream. My throat went dry. Who are you? He took a step closer. My name's Ethan. I'm a friend of your daughter's. I tightened my grip on the album. Where is she? He sighed. Safe. For now. For now. I repeated. What does that mean? He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at the photo album on the counter. You shouldn't have come here, he said quietly. You're not supposed to see that. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. You took these pictures, didn't you? He looked at me, his face expressionless. Not me. My boss. Mark Dempsey?" I asked. He gave a small, cold smile. "That's one of his names." Before I could say another word, he took a small envelope from his pocket and placed it on the counter. "Take this," he said. "It'll explain everything. But you didn't get it from me." And then he was gone. I waited until I heard the sound of the stairwell door closing before I touched the envelope. Inside were two things, a folded letter and a flash drive. The letter had no name, no signature. Just one line written in sharp handwriting. "You were never supposed to find out. But if you're reading this, it's already too late." My hands were shaking as I looked at the flash drive. I didn't have a computer at home anymore. Too old, too slow. So I went to the library the next morning. The same library where I used to take the Henderson kids when I worked as their nanny. I plugged the drive in and opened the only file it contained, Project Silverline.mp4. The video started with static, then a man's voice. It wasn't Mark, but it was someone who sounded familiar. "This is the final documentation for Silverline asset transfer, Dempsey Estate." The camera panned across a table filled with papers, deeds, IDs, notary stamps, fake checks. And there, on top, was my signature, perfectly forged. Then, the voice again. Primary targets, widows over 55, single homeowners. Properties with no active mortgage, low legal risk, emotional leverage through relatives, preferably children. My stomach twisted. They had a system, a method. They preyed on people like me. I closed the laptop fast and took a deep breath, fighting tears. This wasn't just about my daughter's mistake. It was a scam, and she'd been caught in the middle of it. But how deep did it go? Who else was involved? And what happened to Mark Dempsey? That night, I went back home. The house still smelled like my husband's aftershave, faint and ghostly. I sat by the window, watching the street. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound felt like a warning. At 10:47 p.m., the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. "Mrs. Carter," the voice said. Low, calm, confident. "You've been busy." It was him. "Mark?" I whispered. He chuckled. "You really think I'd vanish without finishing what I started?" I froze. "You're supposed to be missing." He laughed softly. "Missing? No, my dear. Just rebranding." "What do you want from me?" There was a long pause. Then he said, "Just one thing. Stop digging." And then, click. The line went dead. The next morning, I took everything, the letter, the flash drive, the photo album, and went back to the police. But the moment I mentioned Mark Dempsey, the officer's face changed. "You're not the first one to come in about him," he said. "Two other families filed, elderly homeowners forged deeds, fake notaries. And now," he leaned forward, "now he's vanished. Or someone made him vanish. He took my statement, made copies of the documents, and promised to call. But as I walked out, I saw two men sitting in a black SUV across the street. They were watching the station, watching me. That night, I packed my bags. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even Mrs. Langley. I left town and drove west until the gas light blinked. I found a small roadside motel, flickering sign, broken vending machine, smell of bleach, and checked in under a false name. For the first time in days, I tried to sleep, but around 2 a.m., a noise woke me up. Soft, subtle, like a phone vibrating against wood. I looked at the nightstand. The motel phone was flashing red. No one knew I was here. I picked it up slowly. Hello, nothing. Just breathing. Then, "You shouldn't have gone to the police." My blood ran cold. "Who is this?" I whispered. "You want to know the truth. Look inside your husband's old tool chest. Then the line went dead. I drove back the next morning. The house was quiet, dust settling like snow on the floorboards. The tool chest was still there, same one he'd used for 30 years. I knelt beside it, heart pounding, and opened it. Inside, beneath the wrenches and nails, was an old metal box, locked, rusted. But my husband had always hidden the spare key behind the shelf. Inside the box were papers, old letters, some faded photos, and a single manila envelope marked Dempsey 1989. I opened it. Inside was a contract signed by my husband and Mark Dempsey, a business agreement from decades ago. At the bottom was a handwritten note from my husband, if anything happens to me. Check the second ledger. Dempsey isn't who he says he is, the second ledger. I didn't even know there was a first. I searched the basement until I found an old wooden crate marked tax docs inside. Beneath stacks of yellowed receipts was a red notebook, the title written in my husband's handwriting. Ledger number 2. The first page stopped me cold. It listed names, addresses, dates, and one chilling header, Silverline transactions. My husband had been investigating Dempsey all those years ago. He'd uncovered the same scam I was now caught in, using fake deeds to steal houses. And then, just 3 months after his last note in the ledger, he died in what they called a car accident. I dropped the book. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely breathe. Had my husband's death not been an accident at all? I ran outside, clutching the ledger. That's when I saw a car parked across the street. Black, engine running, the same one from the police station. A man stepped out, Ethan. He raised his hands again, slowly. Mrs. Carter, please, just listen. I stared at him. You lied to me. He shook his head. No, I didn't. I was sent to protect your daughter. Protect her from who? He looked over his shoulder. From them. From Dempsey's partners. He handed me another envelope. This one stamped with the state seal. Your husband filed a complaint about Dempsey's fraud in 1990, he said. It got buried, but someone's reopening the case now. That's why you're in danger. They think the ledger is evidence. I opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies of legal filings, complaints, police reports, signatures. My husband's name was on all of them. And at the bottom of one, in blue ink, case reactivated, Silverline investigation reopened. I felt dizzy. Where's my daughter? I asked. She's safe, he said. She's been working with us since the start. I blinked. Working with you? Ethan nodded. Denise didn't sell your house for money. She sold it to lure them out, to expose who was behind the Silverline fraud. That's why she forged your name, so they'd take the bait. It felt like the world tilted. She was protecting you, he said softly, just like your husband tried to. I couldn't speak. Every word I'd read in her letter replayed in my head. But now, it all meant something different. She didn't betray me. She saved me. Tears filled my eyes. I looked down at the ledger in my hands. It wasn't just a record. It was proof. And for the first time, I realized my husband, my daughter, and I had all been part of the same fight. A fight against the same man and the same lie. That night, the police raided 3 properties connected to Dempsey's company. They found fake IDs, forged deeds, burner phones, all tied to an underground group selling homes illegally through proxy signatures. Mark Dempsey wasn't missing. He was dead, found buried under an abandoned construction site with 2 others. And the voice that called me pretending to be him? A partner named Cole Jensen, the one now facing charges. Denise was placed under protection as a cooperating witness. And me? I got my house back. But the scars, they'll never fully heal. Some nights, I sit on the porch and think about everything. How a simple signature almost destroyed everything I loved. How secrets from 30 years ago found their way back to my doorstep. And how my daughter's lie became the truth that set us both free. But just when I thought it was over, something strange happened the night I thought once justice was served, I'd finally rest. But peace is a funny thing. It doesn't arrive with a court order or a new deed. It comes quietly, or sometimes it doesn't come at all. The first night back in my house felt like a homecoming and a haunting rolled into one. The air smelled the same, pine cleaner and lemon oil, but something about the silence felt wrong. It was too clean, too still. I walked from room to room like a stranger. Each creak of the floorboards whispered memories, birthdays, laughter, fights that healed too slow. When I reached the living room, I stopped. The light from the street lamp spilled across the floor in perfect lines. But one corner was darker. That's where my husband's old cabinet used to stand, where I kept our wedding photo, and where, somehow, I could still smell cigarette smoke. He'd quit years before he passed. I turned on the lamp. That's when I noticed it, a small hole near the baseboard, perfectly round, like someone had drilled through and filled it back in. I leaned closer. There was something inside. A tiny red light blinked once, then went dark. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a router light or a piece of wiring. But then I saw another behind the bookshelf in the hallway, and another near the vent in the guest room. 3 lights, all faint, all dying, and all pointing toward one thing. Someone had been watching me. I called Ethan the next morning. He came over immediately, wearing a dark jacket and a serious face. He moved through the rooms in silence, pulling out each tiny device one by one. Cameras. Real ones. They're not transmitting anymore, he said, examining the circuit. They were running off a local storage system. In plain English, I asked. He sighed. They weren't streaming. They were recording. Probably everything. My knees nearly gave out. All this time, in my home, he nodded slowly. Whoever placed them knew the layout, knew your habits. These ain't new, Mrs. Carter. Some of them have been here for months. Months. That meant they were there even before Denise sold the house. Before the fake sale. Before the calls. Why, I whispered. Ethan looked at me carefully. Because your house wasn't just bait. It was evidence. Dempsey's team hid something here. Something your husband found before he died. We searched the whole day. Pulled furniture. Checked vents. Every drawer. Every wall panel. Nothing. Then Ethan stopped in the hallway. He looked up at the ceiling and smiled faintly. At a catch, he said, "When was the last time you went up there?" I hesitated. Not since. He passed. He climbed the ladder, flashlight in hand. Dust fell like gray snow as he pushed the panel open. I followed behind, coughing from the stale air. There it was, my old attic. Boxes, old furniture, photo frames wrapped in cloth. And in the farthest corner, an old security DVR unit, red light blinking weakly. Ethan picked it up. "Here's your local storage." My stomach turned. If it recorded everything, that means, he nodded grimly. "Let's see what's on it." We hooked it to my TV downstairs. The footage started grainy, time-stamped months ago. At first, it was just me, dusting, reading, living. But then the angles changed. Different times, different people. One clip showed 2 men in suits entering while I was asleep upstairs. Another showed Denise talking to someone in the kitchen. Ethan's boss, I realized, from the investigation photos. But the worst one was from the night of the fake sale. It showed Mark Dempsey himself sitting in my living room, calmly signing papers by the light of a desk lamp. Behind him, on the wall, hung my husband's portrait, and next to it, a safe I never knew existed. I froze the frame. "What's that?" I asked, pointing. Ethan frowned. "That wasn't listed in your home's blueprint. We moved the painting that night, and there it was, a small hidden compartment built directly into the wall. Inside, a single metal key and an envelope marked for May only. My husband's handwriting." My heart stopped. Hands shaking, I opened the letter. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. The files Dempsey wanted are here, records from Silverline's early days. Don't let them disappear again. Protect Denise. She doesn't know everything, but she will one day." I pressed the paper to my chest and cried for the first time in years. Not out of fear, but love. My husband hadn't just left memories in this house. He'd left a mission. Ethan placed the key in my palm. "It matches the ledger box we found," he said. "But there might be more. A second storage location." He paused, eyes flicking to the attic hatch. "Your husband was smarter than any of them. I think he built this place like a map." Over the next few days, I searched every inch of that house. Behind wallpaper, under floorboards, inside air vents. And then, under the old piano bench, I found a hollow panel. Inside were 5 cassette tapes, labeled in my husband's handwriting, Silverline meetings. 1987, 1989. We played one. The sound was muffled, but I recognized Dempsey's voice instantly. "We'll start with the widows. They don't question paperwork. And if someone digs, we got the local clerk on payroll." I felt sick. Ethan hit pause. This is enough to reopen the entire case," he said. He looked at me. "Mrs. Carter, do you realize what this means?" I nodded slowly, tears welling up again. "It means my husband didn't die for nothing." For the next month, I worked with investigators, handing over every document, every tape, every memory I could recall. The case went national. They uncovered over 20 families caught in the same trap. Denise testified, and for the first time, she and I stood side by side, not as mother and daughter divided by secrets, but as survivors of the same storm. The day the verdict came, I went home early. The air finally felt lighter. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls like greeting an old friend. When I reached the living room, the red light on the floor blinked again, just once, then faded out. I smiled, for the first time, not in fear, but in peace. Because this time, I knew the light wasn't watching me. It was him, my husband. And in that moment, I whispered, "We did it, love. It's finally over." But one letter arrived weeks later, and what it said changed how I saw everything, including weeks passed after the case closed, but the house still didn't feel entirely like home. Every corner whispered secrets I hadn't known. Every shadow reminded me of the months of fear, betrayal, and uncertainty. Denise and I were closer now, but not without scars. We didn't talk every day. Sometimes we just sat in silence, letting the weight of what happened settle between us. Sometimes she'd glance at me, tearful, and I'd see the little girl I once held in my arms, the one who made mistakes because she loved me. It was a rainy afternoon when the letter arrived. No return address, just my name, written in careful cursive. I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to open it. Another part, curiosity, that dangerous itch, made me tear the envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Denise, Mom, I need to tell you something. I never wanted to hurt you. Selling the house. I thought I was saving you. I thought I knew best. I didn't. But I also couldn't go to the police. I couldn't risk them discovering the tapes in the attic or the ledger. I was scared more than you'll ever know. I hope one day you can forgive me. Love, Denise, I sat in my chair, staring at the words. Tears blurred my vision. This was the moment I realized something essential. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It wasn't about condoning what she did. It was about understanding, seeing why someone acted the way they did, even if it hurt you. I remembered the night she packed that duffel bag, standing on my porch. The fear in her eyes, the trembling hands. She wasn't a criminal. She was a daughter who thought she was protecting her mother from a past. Neither of us fully understood. I called her immediately. "Denise," I said softly, voice catching. "I got your letter." She was quiet for a moment. I was scared, Mom. "I know," I whispered. "I know now." And in that moment, something shifted. All the anger, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, they didn't vanish. But they transformed into relief, into understanding, into love. The house itself seemed to breathe a little easier that day. I moved furniture, dusted every corner, and finally, for the first time, sat in the living room without feeling watched. The attic, once a vault of secrets, now felt like a shrine. A place where my husband's wisdom and foresight had guided us even from beyond the grave. I pulled out the old tapes one last time, played them slowly. The Dempsey conversations, the ledger entries, the evidence of their crimes, all of it. I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt strength. We had survived. We had uncovered the truth. We had survived the lies and deception and turned them into justice. And yet, there was a lingering question. How much of life is shaped by choices made out of love, even if those choices seem wrong? How often do we judge someone for acting to protect us without realizing the full story? Denise's letter answered that question for me. She hadn't sold the house to betray me. She had sold it to fight for us. In her own way, she had fought the same battle my husband had started decades before. One evening, I invited her to the porch. Rain had stopped, leaving droplets glimmering on the railings. We sat silently for a long time, listening to the occasional car pass on the street. Finally, she spoke. "I'm sorry, Mom. I wish I trusted you more. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now. I only added fear." I reached for her hand. "You were protecting me in the only way you knew how," I said. And I was angry, yes, but mostly, I was scared. Scared of losing you, scared of losing myself. But we're here now, and that's what matters. She squeezed my hand, tears rolling down her cheeks. Weeks later, the authorities returned most of the items recovered from Dempsey's associates. The ledger, the tapes, even small mementos from my husband's old investigations. All back in my hands. I set up a small shelf in the living room. A place for memory. A place for lessons learned. Every time I glanced at it, I was reminded the past shapes us, but it doesn't define us. Denise moved back home shortly after. We worked together, organizing documents, planning what to donate, and what to keep. And while the scars of the betrayal lingered, the trust slowly rebuilt itself. Not overnight, but in quiet gestures, making breakfast together, fixing a leaky faucet, laughing over an old inside joke only we understood. The final lesson hit me one evening while sitting on the porch, sipping tea. The sky was pink, streaked with gold. Everything looked calm, safe, and I realized something. Life is messy. People we love may hurt us, sometimes intentionally, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of misunderstanding. But forgiveness, that's where the power lies. Forgiveness doesn't mean weakness. It means you've seen the full story. You've felt the pain, and you've chosen to rise above it. I closed my eyes and whispered to the wind, "Thank you, my husband. Thank you, Denise, for showing me that even in betrayal, there is love." Months later, Denise and I planted flowers in the front garden. The roses my husband had loved finally blooming again. We laughed when the sprinkler sprayed both of us, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't think about the past. I thought about the future, about healing, about family. And as I looked at her, my daughter who had made the hardest choices in love, I realized the house was never just a building. It was memory. It was trust. It was life itself. And now it was ours again. Not perfect, not unscarred, but whole. I stepped back, looking at the porch, the flowers, the house that had survived decades of secrets and lies. And I whispered, no matter what storms come, we survive. And when we do, we grow stronger, together. Now, y'all, I gotta ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved? Someone who thought they were protecting you, but it only made things worse? Maybe it was a family member, a friend, someone close to your heart. Drop a comment below and tell me your story, because healing starts when we stop keeping secrets and start sharing truth. And listen, if this story touched you in any way, if it made you feel something real, do me a favor. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe because I got more stories coming your way. Stories about family, betrayal, forgiveness, and everything in between. Real stories, raw stories, stories that'll make you think twice about the people you trust. Next week, I'm gonna tell y'all about the time I found out my best friend had been lying to me for 15 years. And let me tell you, what I discovered in her basement, it changed everything. So don't miss it. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because these stories, they ain't going nowhere. And neither am I until next time. Remember, forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it does give you the strength to move forward. Take care, y'all, and thank